What is going on, everyone? You do not need to adjust your screens or turn up the volume on whatever listening device you're listening to us on. We are back after a 2-week hiatus. Me and Joe are back. We apologize. I was in Vegas last week, so I have a very fair excuse. I mean, come on, who would not rather gamble and hang out with the guys than do a DFS show? Ironically, Joe, did you know you cannot bet on DraftKings? Like DFS in Vegas? What the fuck?
I have been in Vegas for Sundays in each of the last 2 years, so I have very much learned that.
And every year I forget, and every year I get out there and I'm like, shit, I can't do any Thursday night lineups because we usually go from Tuesday to Saturday. So, and I've been doing more NBA, so I was doing a lot of bitching. And then instead I'm placing wagers like I know how to gamble like some, expert, just throwing blatant money on fire. Thank God for the poker tables. But we are back covering the cash game slate for week 12. God, it makes me sad, Joe. We're already in week 12. I hate this.
I mean, as a Giants fan, I'm kind of ready for it to be over, but
I'm probably about 2 weeks as a Falcons fan from joining you at this rate. So
I was gonna say Mike Evans is back now, so I don't know how this goes down the stretch for you.
The schedule is so cake. I was talking about that 2 weeks ago. I did not expect us to lose both the Saints and Broncos game, but going into that weekend, I'm going, man, they still play the Giants, the Raiders. They got the Panthers twice. They literally have just the Chargers. Is the only.
You do have the tiebreaker though, so
we do.
Hope remains.
We got a pretty tough schedule coming up. We still play Minnesota, Washington, the Chargers.
It's not great.
No, it's not. So, and we're the Falcons. That's what we do is blow, sure thing. So, but we're going to get right into it with the quarterbacks. I think my new strategy is I'm just going to spin down. Because more and more, I just don't want to. I just don't want to pay for these guys. Like Daniel's been inconsistent. I can't believe that Mahomes is still this high priced. Like I can't. Like I don't understand it. Like why is he still so expensive? Sure. Golf is intriguing, obviously at 6,600. I do worry about how many more weeks are the Colts going to flirt with potential doom. I did not like as somebody who I would root for the Lions in a heartbeat the second the Falcons are eliminated to win the Super Bowl. What are you doing up 28 points, having your guys in a game and using them? I love Campbell, but you are freaking playing with fire, bro. Say Gibbs tears his ACL at 28 or it's not good. Stroud's a little intriguing to me because, again, with Collins back in a dome, I actually think they're going to be low owned as well. But for me, I mean, the three guys I keep circling. Mm-hmm. Bo Nix, I mean, he's that dude. The Raiders suck. I take a big L on Bo. We'll see if this is a 1 year.
It's looking that way for me right now too. Well, yeah, we'll see, obviously, but it turns out, maybe the Super Bowl winning probable future Hall of Famer head coach knew what he needed to find in a quarterback.
And I did see a lot of comparisons to Drew Brees, right? Like somebody that couldn't really throw it accurately or have, the strongest arm down the field. But, we saw it at Oregon. Very good at getting rid of the ball quickly, very accurate in short space. And they're cooking. But the guy I really like is Baker Mayfield, 6,100. Coming off that bye, and I really don't care if Mike Evans plays or he doesn't. Obviously, it is a
he practiced fully today, so
I mean that's good news. Don't get me wrong. I would prefer him to play for sure,
absolutely.
But I mean, I think Baker's going to be a little lower owned because people are going to remember 2 weeks ago the 8.9 points he scored and arguably his worst game of the season. But he scored 18 points or more in 8 of 10, including 2 or 3 without both Evans and Godwin. He's quietly become a guy that gives you rushing upside, each week, like 20 yards or more in 6 of 10 games. He's thrown 3 passing touchdowns in 5 of 10, 3 or more. And I like that you can actually do an unusual Baker stack, and we'll talk about running backs more in a minute, but I like actually stacking him with Rachaad White, even if Evans comes back at his price at 54. I don't even hate actually playing, especially in, obviously not for cash, this, double stack, but in MME, I kind of like the Baker, Bucky, White, like combo, because White is just basically a pass catcher at this point. I think Bucky's going to be their main back, but
I think so too.
I think the Giants are the kind of defense, like the Giants defense is not bad by any stretch of the imagination, but I do think they're going to struggle with what Baker does, because Baker's just so good at spreading it around. He's proved that it doesn't have to be all big plays with Evans being out. He did it versus my Falcons. He did it the following week where, he can kind of move it up and down the field. I just feel like 6,100, again, cash, we're looking for 3X. He's a very safe play.
No, I'm fully with you on general strategy right now. Like, don't get me wrong, there will be weeks where I'll just be like, fuck it, like Lamar Jackson's here and he's
exactly,
ready to roll.
Or Hurts, yeah.
Or even, the probably one non-running quarterback I feel good about most weeks right now is Joe Burrow, because if Higgins and Chase are both out there and that defense is letting people score 30 points, we're feeling good. But yeah, a lot of the guys we would normally target in the high end are on buys or in games that are not eligible for us this week. So yeah, to me, it's that group right there. The two guys I would throw in too would be Kyler and Geno. The thing is, with that game, I think there's opportunity for it to be a really productive game, and there's also the chance it's like 20-16. So that's why I think my ultimate lean is where you ended up, where the Raiders defense sucks. And the thing I always look at when I'm checking Bo Nix, how effective is that opposing pass rush?
Yep.
Because that's the whole thing with Bo.
So he played the worst pass rush in the NFL last week.
Right. And it went super well. That was the reason why in our weekly picks pool, I looked that up. I was like, let me double check to make sure I'm right about Bo Nix's under pressure kept clean splits. And 86 PFF grade kept clean, 40 under pressure. So yeah, he is a legitimate, very good quarterback when kept clean, which that is the baseline of like that's what you want. And then under pressure so far, he has been the disaster that those of us who doubted him thought he would be. But they've done a good job keeping him clean. Shout out to Max Crosby, but overall 24th in pass rush grade this year. The RIP Oakland, Las Vegas Raiders. On the opposite side, obviously early on, I was hitting Baker a lot. Then all of his receivers got hurt, and lo and behold, he actually has not fallen off the face of the earth.
He's unbelievable. If their record was better, I think he would have a legit case for the MVP.
Yeah, it's really just that San Francisco game was a total egg. Otherwise, he's been continuously producing. I think Liam Cohen is pretty safely going to be in the coaching interviews this offseason, especially if you go back and look at what he did in Kentucky too, where want to know one of the reasons why Will Levis got drafted? It's Liam Cohen.
So the Titans can send all their hate mail to Liam Cohen.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then, what's the one thing you want to check if you're going against the Giants? Oh, will the pass blocking hold up? Because that's the strength of this Giants team. There are holes in the secondary if you have time to find them. Tampa Bay, third best pass blocking grade this year, behind the Green Bay Packers and the Denver Broncos. So again, what's the key, especially with these shorter guys who maybe won't do well against pressure? Just make sure you protect them. And that's what's happening for Bo. That's what's happening for Baker. And the Cardinals are fourth. So again, that's what's happening for Kyler this year. So if
Seahawks run a lot of man, by the way. I'm sure me and you both are going to talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. when we get to the wide receivers. He has been incredible versus man defense. And that is good for Kyler, obviously, especially on the passing front.
But and then the thing with Bo is you don't really have to pair him with anyone. If you are,
I run him naked.
pretty much would have to be Sutton because no one else has any consistency in that offense. But
I just like running him naked, honestly. Like he's one of those guys that he's cheap enough, and with the rushing upside and everything,
I'm with you.
I'm totally good running him naked.
And I will say, if you're going Baker and again, Mike Evans was fully practiced today. I believe he's not even questionable anymore. I would light it up. I would just be
you're all in on it.
I mean, there's always a chance that they're going to ease him back in. But
no, yeah, the Nico Collins. But that was also a game I keep telling people the Texans dominated. So if that game would have been close, I think Collins played more, right?
Obviously, yeah. And there's the chance this is a dominating game. The upside for the Giants, they're coming off their bye, but so are the Bucs. And, if Tommy DeVito, bless his heart, a guy who also falls apart under pressure, and Todd Bowles is ready to roll here. But to me, it's just Mike Evans against this Giants secondary. If we're assuming Baker Mayfield will have time, that's game over fast. So I would not fear it. I would go ahead and lock in that double if you're going with Baker.
I think you just convinced me to kind of change some of my Baker lineups. I like that. I do want to mention one other guy, and it's Tua. 5,800. They're at home. The Dolphins offense is back with Tua at QB, 27.75 points per game in the 4 games since Tua's returned. He's coming off his best fantasy game of the season, scoring 23.4 points. And just his connection with A-Chain in the passing game, outrageous. I got more stuff for A-Chain when we get to the running backs because I love A-Chain this week, but I do want to give you this nugget. A-Chain's caught 37 passes in the 6 games that Tua started, 9 in the 4 that Tua did not. Man, talk about free points. So I do like Tua. He's the other guy. And I was almost there on Kyler. Now I think you had me where I will sprinkle him maybe into some cash lineups because I am really high on Harrison this week, and it makes sense if I am. I might as well just say F it and, roll with that stack. It's not outrageously expensive. Any other QBs you want to touch? You want to move on to running backs?
I think we're going cash. That's probably good for me. Like I have in larger fields, I have some Drake May interest. I think he's going to, my assumption he will be extremely low owned based on, Miami being 3rd against quarterbacks. But again, a big part of that was no one was passing against Miami during the non-Tua weeks because you just didn't need to. This defense is fine. It's not, I'm not one I'm overly afraid of. And 4 games that May has thrown 30 plus passes, 18.5 fantasy points per game. Since week 3, only the Titans and Anthony Richardson have failed to reach 34 pass attempts against the Dolphins.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, to me, there's some opportunity there, but in cash games, there's, it's 5,500 for him. It's 5,700 for Geno. It's 61 for Mayfield. It's 58 for Tua.
Tua's 58. Yeah.
Yeah. Like to me, if I'm going cheap in cash, I think my floor is probably Geno.
No, I like that. All right. And I just real quickly on May, man, that guy's good.
He's just got to cut down those turnovers, especially the frustrating thing is.
But what does he have, right? He's trying to make chicken salad out of chicken shit right now.
He's kept them in games, but then it's at the end of a close game. That's where I'm like, dial it back. Because like this last week, he had 2 minutes to go down the field, and he immediately is like, it's time for a 40-yard bomb. And it's just an easy pick. And you're just like, you don't need to do that here.
You don't, but I like that. I don't want him to lose that bravado.
No, I'd rather
once he gets an offensive line and weapons, that's going to actually work out more times than it doesn't. And it just, to me, it screams how confident he is in his abilities. He's looking at Pop Douglas and Hunter Henry, and he's like, screw it. I can make this throw. I got this. All right, so the running backs this week, really actually tough slate in the sense that I just think there's so many viable plays. I mean, part of me wants to say, Keith, why am I not just rolling Joe Mixon every week to the end of time? I mean, his lowest scoring game is 17 points. He's now scored 26 points or more. And what would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his 7 games. That is outrageous. Who had that on their bingo? I'm not counting week 2 because obviously he went out early.
Yeah.
But I can't because A-Chain is a must start for me. I don't care if he's 50% projected ownership. They continue to not raise him enough for me. Like the one constant the last 3 weeks that I keep getting right is putting him in basically every cash lineup. And he has now played 11 games with Tua in his career where he's played 50% of the snaps and Tua started. He has been RB6 or better in 8 of those games, RB5 or better in 6 of them, and RB3 or better in 5 of them. He's averaging in the 6 games this season with Tua 23 points per game. And we got into it earlier, but just to hear it another way, 13.1 points per game just as a receiver in the 6 games that Tua starts. And then, oh, by the way, he is also averaging almost 13 carries, including 11 red zone touches. He's became the number 1 back. He's getting a lot of the goal. Like everything you want is there. And this is a New England team that I think they're like one of 8 teams in the NFL right now that has already allowed 1,400 yards on the ground and 10 rushing touchdowns.
Yeah, to me, like I wouldn't talk anyone out of Mixon because it's a game that you expect Houston to dominate. So that's obviously pro game script for him. But when he's $500 more than A-Chain, it just doesn't make sense to me because you've got a Tennessee defense, which is one of those defenses that funnels towards the pass. This is a good run defense. They only give up 79 yards per game on the ground to opposing running backs. And this is a team that's bad. Yeah. So like you would think you'd be pounding the run against them. And it's just like, that's so much easier to pass against them. It's kind of like a why bother situation. Right. Meanwhile, with New England, they've been able to suddenly they are not giving up touchdowns on the ground anymore. They opened up with 8 straight games giving up a rushing touchdown. Now they have 3 straight without giving up one. But 2 of those games, they still gave up over 100 yards rushing.
Yep.
So, the only teams they've really stopped truly are, those opening 2 games, Bengals, Seahawks, and then the Bears 2 weeks ago. And
how much was the Bengals like a mulligan on that game too?
Where they're at. I mean, they would like a few mulligans, but
but I'm saying that's the game
far
you can't lose.
The quality of your opponent, that is the clear 1A for their regrets. Yep. Which at the time it was like, it's a bad loss, but nothing to worry about. And then it's like, well, if you're just going to lose every close game you play, you kind of needed that one. But yeah, like New England, this is not a good defense. They have not shown the ability to stop the run consistently at all. They're one of the most giving teams to opposing running backs. I actually think, the 22nd feels, I don't know. I feel like this defense is actually worse than that just against running backs. Oh, like you said, the Dolphins offense is back. A-Chain has been the biggest winner in this offense being back. And yeah, the fact that we're getting the amount of receiving
him and Jonnu production. Jonnu's been
that's true. That's a good point. Jonnu Smith.
Because obviously he didn't have A-Chain's hype, but it's just like Jonnu is once again basically outperforming Kyle Pitts, which just stick it right here.
But yeah. To me though, A-Chain, if we're spending up, he's the guy for me. I can't justify $1,000 more dollars in McCaffrey. I can't justify 500 more on Mixon. Obviously there's always the chance Gibbs has this huge game again against Indy, a team that we expect Detroit to win against. But the fact is Gibbs has more competition in his backfield than A-Chain does. So yeah, it's A-Chain all the way for me.
Do you go pretty far down after this? Because I go way down. Like I go down to your boy in the blue as the next guy that I have in a ton of lineups.
Okay, so I do have one guy.
Let's do it.
It's James Conner, where it's just the forgotten man every year, where you get in your fantasy league.
He's draft, the Mike Evans of running backs, is what I'm calling him.
Yeah, because you get down there and you're like, oh, it's round 5.
He's
And you're like,
disrespected.
I guess I'll
and all
take
he does
James
is have
Conner.
this great season. And you're like, man,
yeah,
why don't I just automatically take him every year? And that it's like what you said, you can wait and get him every year.
I mean, yeah, he has 4 straight games with at least 14 points, and it's 6 of 7, where it's really just that one game at Green Bay. He didn't have anything going on. But otherwise, yeah, he's just churning it out week after week. And actually, he's kind of a guy where he is a big winner if the game is close.
Mm-hmm.
Because there's a great stat from Jake Seeley over at The Athletic where his running back touch percentage when the Cardinals are within 7 points either way of the opposing team, 86% of the running back touches.
Wow.
When you go 8+ points either direction, it's 50%. So if they go into full blowout mode or they fall way behind, they ease off the gas on Conner, which is actually pretty smart way.
It's really smart. Like I'm actually shocked to hear a team pay attention to that kind of stuff. Because what we were just talking about the Lions, right? Like,
yeah,
Conner being an old back, like it makes sense. The Cardinals are now a legit playoff contender.
And again, this is a game where if you told me the final is 33-27, I'd be like, sure. If you told me the final is 17-13, I'd say, sure. If you told me one team just kicks the other's ass, that would be the true surprise for me. So Conner to me is, maybe even more than Marvin Harrison. I think he might be my favorite play in this game. So he is the one guy before we drop down to 6,000 and below. Outside of, again, Achan's my favorite guy that you're going to spend on. But if there's another guy that I want to spend up on, it would be him. And then I'm with you. I'm dropping down to Tracy at 6,000.
So let's get rid of the elephant in the room. Little nervous about Tommy Cutlets starting.
Sure,
but I just have to imagine that means you lean on Tracy even more. And we know the Bucks they're bad. And the big thing for me is they allow the 3rd most receptions per game and the most receiving yards to opposing running backs. And I actually did not know this until you told me this a few weeks ago. Tyrone Tracy was a wide receiver up until the final year of college. Yep. So obviously he has that ability. And I mean, this guy's coming off back-to-back games playing 72% or more of the snaps, which is huge because that was with a healthy Devin Singletary, unlike, some of those other weeks where he was back, but was he really 100%? And I love that in the last 2 games, 6 red zone touches. He'd seen a combined 4 in the previous 8. And this season in the 5 games, he's seen at least 15 touches. I think a number that we assume he's going to hit, right? Because he's hit it 3 games in a row, 16.6 points per game on DraftKings, touchdown in 3 of 5 of those. I really like Tracy. I think the Bucks again are going to score points. I don't think that means Tracy's going to be off the field anymore. And I actually think with Tommy Cutlets, it's only going to raise his ceiling because I have a feeling that DeVito is going to go 2 places, or 3 places, I should say, at a pretty high frequency. Neighbors, Robinson, Tracy in the passing game. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, that would be my guess as well. I mean, if this was last year and you were turning it over to Tyrod, then there's, I think, much more of a down the field aspect where you're like it. We were
begging for Tyrod last year, remember? And then we got rewarded with a bunch of big Darius Slayton weeks.
Yeah, so Tyrod has been the most effective quarterback the Giants have had the last 2 years. And, I mean, the reality with DeVito is he had one legitimately really good game on national television when we inexplicably beat the Green Bay Packers.
That was crazy.
And then he won 2 other games where it was Washington and New England, who you may remember drafted 2nd and 3rd last year.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I would say temper any expectations. Now, I do think Jones was missing a number of open guys. So I wouldn't say, certainly in your season long, don't bench Malik Neighbors unless you're loaded at wide receiver.
Right.
But yeah, to me right now, if I'm banking on a Giant in DFS, it's Tracy and it's not even close.
He's really good.
Where do you drop down to next?
I mean, obviously if Pacheco's out, Kareem Hunt, smash play. Like just absolute smash play. Now I need Pacheco to be out for that to be a smash play, but even if Pacheco is taken off IR and is going to play, I'm still going to have Kareem Hunt. The most points over expectation for the last 6 weeks, and if it's ever going to continue, it's with Carolina. I'm hoping people will maybe be a little leery because he finally had that come down to earth game, right, versus Buffalo, only scoring 6 points. But this is a guy that has still seen 14 carries or more in every single game this year. And we're only 1 game removed. What I really like from he had 7 receptions the week before versus Denver. So it's not, impossible that he's going to be involved in the passing game, which it was early in the season. Again, there's not really much explanation needed other than just they run a lot and Carolina
playing
stinks.
Carolina.
So my next question, though, is which one of the Washington backs you want? Because to me, obviously seeing how bad Dallas has been against the run, especially now that they have Cooper Rush where they don't score points, where it's just teams are going to get up, and I just have a feeling they're just going to pound the rock. Do you continue to route Eckler, who's been hot, or do we go back to Robinson, who I know it's been a minute since he scored more than 14 points, which he scored last week, but he did get 16 carries immediately, right, coming back, and if he gets that versus Dallas, he could easily score 20 points.
Yeah, obviously, huge opportunity in this game where, this is a lot like the Kansas City Carolina game. I mean, because that's where this Dallas team is now. They are a Carolina type team and how awful they are. Where, you could talk me into either guy. I'm going to bank on Brian Robinson's back. He is the primary rusher on the team. And this is a game where you're just pounding them into dirt because you're up by 20 points, maybe in the second quarter.
And kind of a must-win for Washington, if we're being honest, right? You've lost 2 in a row.
If you're going to stay in the division race, I think you have to win this game. You can't be blowing any games. I mean, they already beat the Giants twice, but
I'm just saying, I don't think they're going to get cute. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
if you're this being a game, they get up, they're going to pound the rock. Let's get this game over with, and we're on
100%.
The next. Opponent.
And obviously, they hate Dallas, so they want to crush Dallas.
Who does it though? In their defense.
And I mean, Dan Quinton's probably like, "Hey, look what happened to this defense now that I'm not there."
Exactly.
Enjoy. So I think Brian Robinson to me is. Yeah, he's probably a smash play as well. I mean, like you said, there's some interesting running back stuff this week where, especially there's so many weeks where we get under 6,000. We're just like, I want to find something cheap and it's not there. And this week it's like, potentially it's Kareem Hunt. It's both Washington guys. It's both Buccaneer guys.
That was going to say, that's the last 2 guys I want to talk about real quick is Bucky and White, because Rashad, it is just outrageous what he has done. He's became like kind of the replacement for Chris Godwin in many ways. Like it's a lot of that short stuff. His last 4, 22 targets, 20 receptions, 5 touchdowns. These are receiving touchdowns, by the way. He scored 15.7 points or more in 3 or 4, averaging 19 points per game. And again, the Giants allow 4.6 receptions per game to running backs, the 9th most receiving yards to opposing running backs. But I got to admit, the more I've thought about it, I'm saving $100, and you're telling me I'm getting the guy that all of a sudden is actually scoring just as many points week in and week out. I mean, look what Bucky's done. 18.5, 16.7, 15.4. Kansas City's impossible to run on, so throw that out the window.
Yeah.
17.7 points. And this is an opportunity. This is the first defense that you could see Bucky like New Orleans. What was it, like 6 weeks ago, where he just went absolutely bananas. There's a lot of metrics say Bucky Irving is coming and could be a really good back in this league. I know that you were the one that actually turned me around on him this summer, to the point where by like June, July, I was saying that I would rather take Bucky Irving than Rashad White in fantasy leagues. And I mean, it's ended up being pretty even, if we're being honest. Like they've both been very productive, especially with the PPR league. But
in one of my leagues, they are my running backs.
Are they really?
Because
bastard.
Well, I fucked up because I drafted Tyrone Tracy and then dropped him like the week before Singletary got hurt. Otherwise, my team would be like the team of destiny right now because I'm loaded everywhere else. But I've shockingly I assumed it would be one of those things where, like, if I start both, one of them will have a good game. And it's like there's been multiple weeks, especially with the receivers hurt, where they both give me 10 plus points.
And Joe,
like,
again,
awesome.
You get Carolina
Please.
twice the rest of the way, New Orleans, the Giants, the Raiders. Like, you've got enough matchups to where, as long as you don't got on that Chargers week, I think it may work out for you. Are you leaning that way too? Save the 100 and play Bucky if you're going to play one of them in cash, or which way are you?
I am, because to me it's very well. First of all, Evans coming back, maybe that lowers Rashad a tiny bit. Again, though, I think you're right.
Nate Markham said he thinks it's Otten that actually is going to be hurt the most
the guy
by
who
that.
For sure gets the biggest hit. I still think Otten. I should double check what his price is this week because he's gone up so much. But yeah, Otten's the guy who takes the biggest hit because he was the number one receiving option in this offense.
Your guys are like really good versus tight ends, right? I think they're like first and
we have been
points allowed.
That has been a big turn over the last 2 years. Was like, if you suddenly have like linebackers who can move, turns out tight ends don't destroy you every single week. But yeah, to me, it's matchup dependent, and if it's a game where I think Tampa Bay is going to win and quite possibly win handily, then it's a Bucky Irving week because he's so much more efficient as a runner. Like, Player Profiler has their true yards per carry, and his is 1.4 yards better than Rachaad White's. You go missed tackle rate. Rachaad White, 48th. Bucky Irving, 3rd. So, Rachaad, God bless him, amazing receiving running back. Not the most dynamic runner. Bucky Irving is a legitimate runner. And in a game that I think Tampa Bay probably wins by double digits, I'm going to go with Bucky Irving. Especially, like you said, I save $100. So, like, why, even if it's a toss-up, save the $100.
I love that. The wide receivers this week, much easier to me. Like, it's funny. Running back is the position that's making it difficult for me because there's only a handful of quarterbacks, handful of wide receivers, tight ends that I want to play this week or that I just feel really good about. The first one I test you out on, because it's probably the one that people are going to be like, ooh, really?
Okay.
It's Nico Collins. I think that he is a ridiculous discount versus Tennessee. And I know people are going to go, oh, they got, good pass defense. That's fair, but this is a guy averaging more points than St. Brown and Jefferson. $500, $700 more, those guys are. Last week played 47% of the snaps, still saw 7 targets. Would have had, a monster game if not the 77-yard first play touchdown called back. But the big thing is they're back at home, where when I tell you Nico Collins has been good at home this year, Joe, he has ran 82 routes at home this season, seen 27 targets, caught 22 passes for 364 yards and 3 scores. That includes a Buffalo game where he ran 5 routes before getting knocked out of that game. He still had 2 catches for 78 yards and a touchdown. And then again, people are going, the Titans are a really good secondary. Don't you think Chicago's secondary is better?
Oh, by a mile.
In that game versus Chicago in Houston, 8 catches for 135 yards and a score. I think Nico's that dude, and I think you're getting him at an extreme discount. I think he's actually going to be low owned because of that number next to Tennessee. And I think the Texans passing game needs to get right. Like, it's been rough for Stroud lately. It really has. And we talked about this is a good run defense. Like, the Titans have a good run defense. I think Collins could potentially go bananas. I think worst case, he's going to get 100 yards and a touchdown. That's going to be right around that 3 times number. And again, he's averaging more points per game. I know it's a smaller sample size than St. Brown and Jefferson. He's $700 cheaper. I think he's going to be low owned. And again, just being at home in that dome and how good he's been. Not only this year, I looked last year too. Almost all of his monster games were at home. Like, that's just for whatever reason, he's so much harder to cover in Houston. Stroud's better there. I really like Collins. Are you can you see that, or am I out of my mind?
So I've got a few things in your favor, and then I've got the one really big thing that's not in your favor.
Oh.
So the biggest thing in your favor is you're 100% right. This Titans secondary is not that great. They're fine. Don't get me wrong. I think they're very well coached. I'm blanking on their defensive coordinator. He's new. He came from Baltimore. He's the guy the Giants tried to hire. He's a very in-demand name, and you can see why. This defense is largely held up while the offense has been mostly putrid outside of Tony Pollard. But yeah, again, this is actually a pass. Theoretically, it's a pass funnel defense. They are 8th in DVOA against the run. They're 18th against the pass. They are 20th in coverage grade on PFF. So again, there's nothing about this secondary that you're looking at and you're going like, oh my God, like we got to stay away from this guy or whatever. That's not what's going on here. And then, yeah, 7th worst pass rush grade on PFF. So, yeah. And then PFF advantage on the wide receiver versus the opposing cornerbacks. He's the 4th best this week. And there's a couple guys that we'll get to later that are going to be out there. A.J. Brown is the other high-priced guy who, sadly, we do not get to use the Eagles-Rams because, my God, we would have so many Eagles and Rams. And
how about the I want a bunch of the Chargers.
Ravens. Like if you were like, you could make a team out of all the players in the rest of this week, and you could take just those 2 games. And obviously, you'd have to remove price points here, but I would.
Well, that's what I mean, though. About that game, I like
games.
Bateman, right? Like I like some of the cheaper wide receivers in that game. Obviously, Herbert. Like
we would obviously be slamming a number of Chargers who are like low priced because it's Ravens. Outside of when they play the Steelers, it's a shootout. But yeah, so Nico Collins is so much better than the opposing defense here. The big issue, and again, it's that the Titans are almost always losing. That's why despite being much better against the run in the past, they faced the 4th fewest pass attempts this season. And they have given up the fewest yards to number 1 wide receivers. They are giving up 41.3 yards per game, according to FTN. So, it's really a question of, will the opportunity be there? Because if it is, he's way better than the Titans' opposing players, and Stroud should have a reasonable amount of time to throw. But this is a defense that does a reasonable job disguising stuff. They will most likely be losing. Again, that's why it could be the Joe Mixon day yet again. So it's too risky for me personally. But if your gut is saying go for it, it's not one where I'm like, it's not like your gut says a running back against Kansas City. And you're just like, you should tell your gut to shut up because the game script is going to be bad probably. And the defense is elite. It's like the game script I don't love in this. But he could absolutely dominate if he gets the chance to.
All right. So what wide receiver is the first one you're taking off the board, like in the expensive range?
I mean, you could talk me into Amon-Ra, who might be he's give or take A-Chain, probably my favorite, just straight up, like regardless of salary play.
He's reaching that price point though, where
that's ultimately where I land as well.
What's our 4X rule? Like he's had literally
he's got to get to 25 points. Yeah.
2 games since week 2 where he's eclipsed that. And I mean, he's been great. Again, I'm not, it's just so can he have and I also think because of the 41-point game and the fact that, again, I don't know what the fuck the Lions were doing, but they were just throwing it up 35 points left and right. I don't see that happening again. So does that mean you go straight down to Evans?
That's where I end up. Because I love Amon-Ra against any team that's playing a ton of zone, and that's basically all the Colts do. And that's actually why it's not a Jameson week this week, because we want Jameson against the man teams. But yeah, to me, again, it's like Malik Neighbors, there's opportunity there, but the risk just is way too high with DeVito and Jamel Dean is coming back. Now, granted, Tampa Bay's defense wasn't really stopping a lot of receivers when Jamel Dean was even out there, but that's a boost for them, and I don't want to roll the dice on DeVito.
Right.
Christian Gonzalez is good, even if the rest of that defense is not New England. So I don't love the Tyreek play. So to me, I am willing to roll the dice on Mike Evans as, the guy clearly by far with no Chris Godwin in that offense. Again,
is his corner matchup one of the better ones? Because I know you were going over that list or you're talking about it, hinting at it. Or is it other guys? We'll get to the other ones if he's not one of those.
So it's actually surprisingly not. He's actually pretty middle of the pack this week. But again, Deonte Banks has been benched twice. We've seen
There's no Godwin. We've seen this story before with Evans, with Baker, with no Godwin. It's like, remember when Godwin went out last year? It was like just immediately like 12, 15 targets a game. And if I'm going to get that, I don't care really who he's playing with Evans, basically skill and Baker's. I mean, Baker again can spin it.
Yeah. So mine is Evans, and then I'm dropping down into the low sixes from there.
Yep.
You could talk me into a DK, but I actually probably at this point, JSN's 300 cheaper. I'll go with JSN if I'm trying to do like the Geno combo.
You don't need a combo. Like JSN should be in everyone's lineup. Okay. Do you know that since week 8 among wide receivers, wide receiver 1 in receiving yards per JSN, wide receiver 2 in receptions per JSN, wide receiver 4 in targets per JSN, wide receiver 1 in fantasy points per game. And he's the 12th most expensive wide receiver on the slate. But the big thing for me is his ADOT went down considerably with the return of Metcalf last week. You might be going, Keith, that's a bad thing. It would be if they weren't facing a Cardinals defense that allows the 10th most receptions per game to opposing wide receivers, but are very good at not giving up big, explosive plays. Which one of those 2 wide receivers is more likely to have 9-10 catches for 80, 90 yards? It is absolutely JSN. As we know, Metcalf is more of the big play wide receiver. I think at minimum, he's going to score 17 points. Like, I really do. Like, I'd be shocked if he didn't have 8 for 90. And at 6,300, that's right around, right? That is the 3X number that we want. And he's got the upside of potentially just going absolutely bananas. We've seen it the last few weeks. I love the reason I feel so bullish about it is Metcalf came back last week. He still had one of his best games of the year. And I think that it took Metcalf being out for them to realize what you were telling me, right? 2 years ago? This guy is really, really good. And I think Seattle has kind of learned how to utilize him because it was out of necessity. And now even when Metcalf back, they're going for it. And against the Arizona defense that, again, a lot of receptions, but they don't necessarily give it the big plays. I think that's really good for JSN.
Yeah, I think he's the guy. He was frustrating me earlier in the season because I was really big on him. I think I said on one of our pods that I thought he would lead the team in receptions. And then early on,
you thought he would outscore Metcalf. Because I remember being like, really?
I might have said that.
And I think he is. Like, I mean, not even just
obviously
points because
obviously DK got hurt. But
points per game, though, I think he's now basically caught him on the season.
So currently, at least so far as DK goes, because obviously probably most of your leagues are not giving 100-yard bonuses, he's 0.7 points ahead of JSN. So, but yeah, it's the old 1A, 1B. It used to be with Tyler Lockett. That's what this offense is right now. And when you can get the one guy for $300 cheaper, and like you said, I think the matchup probably leans towards JSN. I like that more. Right beneath him, I am not afraid of.
Oh, yeah, Downs we trust?
The QB switch. Downs is the guy who least falls off.
Yeah.
With the QB switch. I mean, you look through his season, he misses the first 2 weeks because he's hurt.
All right, Joe, don't make too good of a case because now I'm going to be getting confused because I told you I felt pretty confident, but you could talk me to Downs in 2 seconds. I think he's so good.
Downs comes back in week 3. He eases in, has a 5-point game. He's been double digits every week but one since then.
And I guess he had like his biggest game in a while too, didn't he? With last week with
he just had 584 and a touchdown against the Jets. Now, granted, the Jets defense is currently falling apart completely.
But they don't score points like the Lions do. Hell, the Lions could be up 28-7, which is a dream scenario, right? If you're trying to play Downs in this Colts.
Right. I expect the Lions, again, it's Lions, it's indoors. We love the Lions. We love the Lions in general, but especially indoors. But yeah, the Lions run the most man coverage this year. They're right around 45%. Downs is top 11 in yards per route run.
That's good
and
stuff,
fantasy
Joe.
Points per target against man.
That's very good.
He shreds man. He's the guy that has the best connection with Richardson. And yeah, I said coming down the pike here, we're going to have the guys who have the biggest matchup advantages. Second biggest this week is Josh Downs.
Give me the top 5 real quick.
Let's see. Somehow I just lost it wherever I had it.
That's all right. You can pull it up in a minute. I'll go ahead and talk about Marvin.
Yeah, you go, and I'll come
while
in
you're doing that, because it is literally basically the same case that you just made for Downs. It's the same thing for Harrison Jr. I did not realize that his season looks totally different. If you look at it from a standpoint, they have played an unusual amount of teams that just run crazy high zone rates. And if you go to teams that just play man at like 35% of the time, it totally changes. And the reason for that is versus man, this guy is what we were using earlier. He's a man eater.
Cue the music.
He is absolutely incredible. The win rate versus man, top 5. He's top 10 in fantasy points per target versus. Oh no, excuse me. I'm sorry. Here it is. He's 10th in win rate. His target rate versus man, Joe. Are you ready for this?
Hit me.
44.4%.
That's pretty good.
Seahawks, again, running about 45% of the time, and he's 15th in fantasy points per target versus man. And they're coming off a bye, too, which I think that means they're going to have some plays designed up for him. And it's actually making me think, if I can get away from Collins, which that's more of a gut play, and then honestly get away from Evans, playing that JSN, or and I could put one in the flex, I guess, actually, but playing that JSN, Harrison Jr., Downs trio at wide receiver really allows you a lot of flexibility with the rest of your lineup. And I feel very confident about all 3 of those guys. Not only just because, again, they've been good, but just the kind of matchup they have, game script, etc. And again, he's just been so much better in games when teams run a lot of man defense. Another weird thing is Seattle, for whatever reason, much worse at home than they are away to wide receivers. They give up 155 yards per game. In road games, they're giving up 241 yards per game to wide receivers. In home games, like, what is going on?
That is an interesting split.
Right?
Darius Slayton, I believe, had a 100-yard game in one of the 2 Giants wins this season.
That's what I'm saying. It's crazy. I actually went and had to it's one of those stats that I believe the site that it came from, but I went to ESPN and had to start looking it up, going, what is going? And it is true. They, for whatever reason, wide receivers have been cooking versus them. So I love all 3 of them. Did you find the list?
I did, and I'll go ahead and I'll intro it with the next guy that I love, which is Juwan Jennings at 5,600.
You're so smart, Joe. That's why I love you.
The number 1 matchup advantage according to PFF this week, Juwan Jennings. Then Josh Downs, AJ Brown, Nico Collins, Deebo Samuel.
Oh, so Collins is 4th?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm going to have a hard time staying away from him.
Like I said, yeah, Nico is...
That's like that gut play. You know, sometimes I get those gut calls, Joe, that I'm just like, man, I think Nico's going to go. And I really do think he's going to be very low owned after lap. People were disappointed how many snaps he played, the performance. And it's like, he got 7 targets playing 48% of the snaps. Like, if he plays 70, that's going to be a 10-target game. You know what I mean? That was a game they were up huge. So say what you want about, you know, the Titans and their offensive efficiency, whatever. I mean, where the Cowboys were out of that game in the first half, he still got 7 targets.
Yeah. So, right. I mean, Nico's the man. He is a top 5 wide receiver. He has a quarterback who's extremely accurate. He's facing a team with mediocre coverage and little pass rush. Again, it's just, will the game script steer strongly away? Maybe.
Oh, let me ask you something about Jennings before you get in this spill. Does it matter if Purdy doesn't play? Because there actually is now some concern that he may not. Or is it the opposite where you think that just means it's more likely because he has that advantage? And by the way, have you seen his first read target in games with either Deebo or Ayuk? Either one of them missing. And obviously we know that's going to be that way the rest of the season. 41.8% only your boy, Malik Neighbors,
Makes sense.
is above 40% at 43%. I was talking about it last week. Jennings may be one of those guys that just ends up winning a ton of people fantasy football leagues. And what's hilarious is people probably picked him up and dropped him. That's how I got him in both leagues I have. When somebody picked him up after the monster game, he got hurt. They dropped him. I scooped him up and then got lucky that Ayuk got hurt.
I mean, yeah, that's the thing is with Ayuk gone, he's honestly, he's giving us as good as Ayuk ever gave us. And I will say Ayuk didn't really show up this year, but he's really legitimately like, you looked at metrics that were measuring efficiency and he was a top 10 wide receiver. And that's what Jennings is giving us. I mean, again, this is a guy who's missed 3 games. He was the 3rd wide receiver for, I don't know, 3 or 4 of those games, because I know both those guys missed a reasonable amount. He's 8th in red zone targets.
Wow, I did not know that. Holy cow.
And he has 22 targets the last 2 weeks since he's come back. Like, I don't understand why Debo is $900 more. He is 17.
Debo's been awful. Like, if we want to talk about a guy that's disappointing in this offense, it's been Debo.
Debo has, I believe it was 13 targets the last 2 weeks, and then he has 4 carries.
And Kittle's coming back too. Like, so like, to me, Debo's the one that's going to get hurt
right?
by that, right? Like, I feel like Debo's going to get hurt, and it's going to be a lot of Jennings Kittles.
I just don't see a scenario right now where Juwan Jennings is under 6,000, and I'm not like, I should put Juwan Jennings in every lineup.
Well, and that's especially the number 1 wide receiver cornerback matchup on top of that.
Yeah, and it's a Green Bay team that should be able to score on you. So it's not like this becomes some game where it's like, you know what, it's Christian McCaffrey and then it's Jordan Mason in the 4th quarter because we're up by 17.
Well, can they do that anyway with CMC? He does not look like the CMC that we remember so far.
Not so far. So yeah, to me, the slam play for the San Francisco offense every single week until he gets priced appropriately or he falls off for multiple weeks in a row is Juwan Jennings.
We are so in sync this week, which I like that because normally that is good. For us, again, there's one other guy basically I want to talk about for cash, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to play him because, again, it's going to be hard to, stick away from those guys. But Rome Odunze, 4,800. Him and Roshan Johnson, the 2 big winners from the change at OC. Did you see the stats on Roshan?
I saw that there was a pretty heavy switch in the
I would say, first down of long distance, it was like 86%. Short distance, it was 83%. He got like 55% of the carries inside the 10. Like, I mean, it was good news for people that have been holding on to Roshan Johnson. But anyway, Odunze, his 2nd highest target total of the season, 10. It's the first game all season that Allen, Moore, and Odunze were all playing, and he was the guy targeted the most. It's only the 2nd game since week 3 played more than 80% of the snaps. And then the final part of this is just the Vikings D is a treasure trove for wide receivers. 2nd most receptions per game, over 14 to wide receivers. 3rd most yards per game, nearly 200, 185. And the 8th most receiving touchdowns per game. And kind of like the same thing you're saying about Jennings, that's why I have a hard time being like, man, maybe I do need to get this guy in some lineups, is the fact that he's 4,800. Now, my one concern is I want to see the forecast and the weather because that's an outdoor game. I actually think that's going to be an ugly game, but I do think he's so cheap and the Vikings have so many issues with wide receivers. I think Odunze may be the number 1 wide receiver rust away for the Chicago Bears, which – I know for you, who, was the biggest, telling everybody, hey, I know these other wide receivers are really good, but do not sleep on Rome Odunze. We're starting to see that, and it seems like Chicago's kind of figured that out as well.
And what you said about the Minnesota defense, absolutely true. And not one of those things where it's like they're giving up 120 to the number 1 wide receiver, and that's where it's all going. According to FTN, they are 27th in yards allowed to number 1 wide receivers, 25th in yards allowed to number 2 wide receivers, and 31st in yards allowed to number 3 wide receivers. They give up at least 54 yards to all 3. It's between 54 and 74. So, this is very much a defense that will give it up to anybody. And so, yeah, we got a Bears team where sometimes it's hard to know which wide receiver. But I'm with you, though. Like, I still think DJ Moore is good, and eventually that will show up.
Mm-hmm.
But it hasn't really so far, and Ndunze is clearly trending upward.
He's supposedly unhappy too, which always gets me concerned with somebody like DJ Moore. Like, he's starting to grumble a little.
You don't love it. You don't love it, and especially on a season that seems like it's on the brink of just completely falling apart.
And that might have been why, again, his targets were down last week. And I just want to say, though, Chicago should be ashamed that they waited that long, because they had set, you saw last week, they've been setting Caleb Williams up for failure, really against every team that is not a really awful defense. That was the first game where I think they said it was like his first 15 pass attempts, all of them were out of his hands within 3 seconds of being snapped.
Right.
If he does that, Caleb Williams is going to be very good. But you have to help a quarterback do that. Like, quarterbacks are going to try to make plays. If you design all these routes and stuff down the field, you've got to take that away by...
especially a guy like Caleb Williams.
Exactly. And I'm glad that they figured it out. Good for Thomas Brown. Excited to see what Caleb does the rest of the way, when it seems like they now have a coordinator that understands he's got to nurture and let his QB grow. Do you have any other? You want to go tight ends? Because, again, it's loaded in that middle range. Dunze is the only other guy to even consider. And it's going to be a fist fight for me, just trying to figure out, do I want to play Evans or Collins? And then it may be a 4 wide receiver week, to be honest.
Yeah, I think cash, it's hard for me to really lock in on anyone. Like, obviously, you could talk me into Romeo Doubs in a game that could be a shootout. Like I said, I think, Drake May is going to have to end up slinging it. And so every New England wide receiver is cheap and probably still the guy you want to bet on the most.
I would rather for cash. We'll talk about him in just a second.
But yeah, I don't think there's anyone that I feel confident enough where I would just say, I mean, most weeks in cash, you're trying to find that super cheap guy. You're kind of going a little bit off of a gut play. Yep. And yeah, that
you go Baker, Tua, though, and those 3-6K guys, and then you sprinkle in either a Tampa or a Washington running back, it's very feasible this week with a cheap defense, a tight end that's not outrageous.
I think I like that.
Tight end. I just want to mention my boy Bowers. I am considering it. Like, at this point, goodness gracious. Like, since week 4, which I believe that was when Adams was traded, 23.7, 16.1, 19.3, 10.8, 15.5. Obviously, the monster game, 34.3. He is just, again, it's not.
He's everything you said he would be.
It's not me taking a victory. I'm just so happy because I've never been more sure about a player in my life, because he's 21 years old. I keep telling people he will not turn 22 for 3 more weeks. And he's doing this. He ain't even got his man strength yet, Joe. Like, goodness gracious. Kittle scares me because of the, coming off injury.
I'd agree with that.
Kelsey, too expensive. Last week, I'm like, I'm done. Because last week was the week that I was like, all right, Buffalo, run a ton of zone. Like, you dip in there. I was shocked. And I'm going to be honest. I go all the way down to Henry. You could talk me into Jonnu Smith. It'd be easier in MME. But in reality, to me, it's about 2 guys. It's Hunter Henry and it's Zach Ertz. I mean, Henry is he is the number 1 basically wide receiver in this offense. I mean, for all intents and purposes, that is who Hunter Henry is. He just continues to put up good points. He had that, bad game, I think it was 2 weeks ago. But that was kind of a difficult matchup. And I think that he's going to get back on track this week. Like, I really do. And I do like the fact that I think New England's going to be down. But I actually even think the more sensible play is Zach Ertz.
Interesting.
Can I interest you in, Joe, that he was tied 9th last week and first read target share at 35%. The only people in front of him, Bowers, Pickens, Jennings, St. Brown, Kupp, Garrett Wilson, Puka, Shakir, Higgins. Not exactly expect to see Zach Ertz on that list. He's now been tight end 11 or better in 4 of 7, 5 targets or more in 6 of 7, 4 more receptions and 4 assists. And the big thing for me is defenses are adjusting to Jaden Daniels and making it a little bit more difficult for the rookie QB. They know now what he wants to do. Ertz has become the security blanket, and his targets just continue to rise. First 4 games, 16 targets. Next 4 games, 29 targets. His last 2, 15 targets. And he is facing a Cowboys D, 6th most touchdowns per game, and the most receiving yards per reception in the NFL at almost 13 per to opposing tight ends. So I like that because Ertz is basically at a floor of 4 or 5 catches. And now you're telling me he's getting a team that almost gives up a full touchdown per game to tight ends and give up 13 yards per reception. I really like Zach Ertz this week. If you look at it, it is starting to funnel towards him more and more to where it's clear. It's like McLaurin and then Ertz. And then everybody else is just kind of fighting for scraps, at least in the passing game.
So I'll push back a little bit, mostly in that I think I would rather just go with Henry, who, again, is game script. We feel like we're going to love it. Has been pretty consistent with the yardage and receptions. It's just, if we get a touchdown, then we're, cartwheels. We've easily hit our triple with him.
Right.
Jonnu, who's, we saw what can happen last week. I picked him up because I had a bye week with one of my tight ends. Thank God I did that. But the one problem with Ertz, and it's a great stat from Nathan Jenke at PFF, he plays 15% fewer snaps in games they win because he's the constant guy in 11 personnel, and then he's often off the field in 12. So when they're going into let's run the ball more, that's when Zach Ertz is coming off. This is a game we expect them to dominate. So, I think, to your point, there's a chance that even before – it's like the Nico thing. I don't expect it to be close. I don't expect either of these guys to put up points in the fourth quarter of this game unless something's gone kind of wrong for their team in the game. But if you're the guy who scores one of the touchdowns in the first quarter, it doesn't matter. So I think that's very real, but I would just rather spend $200 more and get a Hunter Henry or $300 and get a Jonnu Smith.
What about $400 and get a TJ Hawkinson? Because I forgot that is the one area in the passing game that
where the Bears are susceptible. Yeah.
Yep. And I didn't realize he's that cheap until literally just now. Like, that is alarmingly low, in my opinion, for a guy that if they're forced to throw, which I think they will be, we're just, again, a week removed from a 9-target game and a competitive game versus Jacksonville, right? Yeah. I feel like this game is going to be competitive. Do you?
I think it is.
I do too.
I mean, again, there's the chance that Chicago is just like getting blocked on a game-winning field goal after you did the thing that annoys me so much when it's like, we're in field goal range.
Did you hear the stat too?
Like,
if they would have gained 4 yards,
their kicker go up like 20%.
41 of 41 for his career from 4 yards closer.
And obviously, people can say, it's blocked. You can't totally control that. But again, the closer you get.
He's having to kick it lower, though,
right,
because he knows he's got to kick it. Like, he's got to hit it hard.
The closer you get, the higher your arc on your liftoff.
To me, that's a fireable offense. That's the kind of thing that
it drives me nuts.
Me and you as a head coach, I would have that fucking information. I would have a chart with my kicker and go, okay, we need to pick up 4 or 5 yards. So he is going, because he knows that too.
I mean, to me, get it under 40. There's not a kicker in the NFL who should be on your roster who you don't trust from under 40.
Yeah, I agree.
45, stuff happens. So, yeah, that drives me nuts. But assuming that wasn't like the death knell and this team just collapses, again, this is still a very good defense. It's Caleb Williams, who hopefully is rebounding under a new coordinator. It's Rome Odunze, like we said earlier, kind of coming into his own. So, yeah, I think Chicago can play with Minnesota, especially, Sam Darnold, guy who's
outdoors,
still prone to a couple boneheaded choices a game. You capitalize on 1 or 2 of those, you're in it, if not winning the game. So, yeah, I like the TJ Hawkinson one a lot. Again, yeah, to me, there's kind of like the two groups where it's like, yeah, you can spend up. Brock Bowers, love him every week.
But let's be honest, like this week, right? It's hard to justify because there is what? From Jennings, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, for you, maybe 6, 5 for
receivers.
You. Wide receivers you really like from 7,600 to 5,800. I would rather make sure I get 3 or 4 of those guys in my lineup.
Sure.
Then as much as I love Brock Bowers. You know what I mean? Or Kittle.
That's
or
fair.
Whoever.
I mean, Kittle, I think because he's coming off of an injury, there are still, even without Ayuk, plenty of.
And again, be careful because if Purdy's out, like I don't even know if I can.
Yeah, if Purdy's out, then it's all up in the air. Obviously, Kelsey's playing a defense that can't cover tight ends. So you feel good about that. Trey McBride, pretty much always.
But they can't also stop the run, right? So
Trey McBride is kind of like not even poor man's because that's too insulting. But
he just hasn't scored touchdowns.
Version of Bowers, season. Right? He's basically just that right below Bowers, where it's like, I trust this guy to be involved every single week. I just don't know if he's going to get me the touchdown that I need.
And he has Harrison to contend with, which is the difference. Like Bowers doesn't have that number one wide receiver.
But he also has a quarterback that I think is good at football.
No, that's very fair.
Yeah. So that helps too. But yeah, so to me, it's like if you have the money and you really like one of those guys, power to you. Those are all good matchups to me. I feel good about them. But yeah, otherwise, drop down Hawkinson, Smith, Henry. And yeah, if you're so inclined to Ertz, I feel pretty good about all those. Super cheap. That saves me that money where maybe, now I'm hitting 3 receivers at that 6K range. So yeah, my guess is once I finish all my lineups, it's mostly going to be those 3 guys right at that 4K range.
Let me give you one more name, and I am serious about playing him this week.
Okay.
3,400. Jatavian Sanders. Kansas City, we think,
I like it.
Right?
No, I like it.
Is going to be up. He's played 69% or more of the snaps and ran routes on 66% or more of the team's passing plays in 5 of their last 6. He's finished top 15 at the position 4 of the last 5. To me, the real impressive thing, he scored 9.9 points or more during the stretch against New Orleans, Atlanta, Washington, who all rank in the middle of the league versus tight ends. He scored 8.8 points against your team, the Giants, who are the stingiest team in fantasy versus tight ends. And KC, like I know people go back to that Baltimore game and the Cincinnati game.
Sure.
They played a lot of games. They still 6.5 receptions per.
Well,
that's
and it's also
74 yards per game. Holy
and Cincinnati is also like, that's not one that I think people should hand wave away because it's like, all right, you play the Ravens where it's like there's likely 2 potentially elite.
It's really likely just went off action that game, if I remember, right? Yeah.
But it's like they have a bunch of tight ends that can kill you. It's like Gesicki's not going off every single week, and I know that was like a Higgins is out, and he has been pretty good in those games. But yeah, like I want to hand wave away that like that is the best way to attack this defense.
And he actually reminds me a little bit of Likely, right? More of a wide receiver type tight end. Like that's why his snap percentage, like I said, it's around 68, 69%.
No, I like that play a lot.
Because he doesn't block when they run. And you cannot run on Kansas City. It's a bad matchup for Hubbard. I can't believe this is the most Carolina thing ever to bring Brooks out this week. If they do that, I'm just like, you guys are fucking morons.
That's also one of the things. I mean, this isn't super fantasy related, but for all the talk that we have, and obviously it transcends not just the year. So obviously most of the credit for Kansas City's like insane record of comebacks under Mahomes goes to Mahomes and Reed. But also this year, listen, it's a lot easier to come back against teams if they can't run on you because that's what drains the clock. That's what sets up 3rd and short.
Right point.
So then you get you get a sack, you get a knockdown pass, they're in 3rd and long. Boom. Now you got Spags scheming stuff up, and then the ball's back in Patrick Mahomes' hand, and trouble is coming. But yeah, that's what's so great about this Kansas City team. It's why up until last week, they'd won every single week. And yeah, I love that Sanders play. I think that makes a shit ton of sense.
Because if you're trying to jam as many of those expensive
guys,
if
we got to go
every few hundred's going to matter, and I don't feel like it's as big of a drop off. Like with especially the ceiling, like I actually think his ceiling is higher than most of those guys, like above him. And he's just, I mean, like you can say, like if you're thinking about Henry, that's $600. You're thinking about Hawkinson, now you're talking about
800.
What? 800. That's huge. Defenses, and then we'll get out of here because surprise. I told Joe we'll go short. Yeah, we've gone an hour and 10 minutes.
One day we'll do it. One day.
Yeah, actually, I mean we got to be ourselves. Easiest transition ever. I have one defense this week.
Well,
Chicago Bears.
Yeah.
Again, you know our strategy. We just basically go down to the cheapest team we can. And I do have actually there was one other player. I'll mention him after we get done with this. So at least 3 points scored in each game this year. So that's their floor. I mean, they've done it every single game.
They're not going to hurt us. They're not going to hurt us.
Points or more, 9 of 10. Again, these home away splits. I know they're trends. They're not real stats, but I believe in that kind of stuff. 10.5 points per game in home games, 5.25 points per game in away games. And they played way more home games than they have road games. The Vikings in their last 3 games outdoors, not great. 23 points versus the Titans. 12 points versus the Jaguars, 20 points versus I guess that's technically a dome, right? Is it a dome out in LA? Actually, I don't know.
I don't think so. This seems
Either
like
way,
something we should know.
Close. It doesn't matter. But in those games, Sam Darnold, you were talking about it, only 242 yards per game, 4 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. The more important thing, he didn't eclipse 246 yards in any of them. And again, this is a Bears team. I think their defense is really good. And then the most important thing, and the reason I really like it, he's been sacked 10 times in his last 4 games. Something that was not happening early. It's happening more and more frequently. I just have a hard time at 2,500 at home, divisional game. It's usually a little bit uglier, more of a rock fight. To me, that's going to be my lineup pretty much across the board.
Yeah, this is one, again, unless whoever is pricing this is counting on the collapse that could happen with
that's
the Bears.
That's fair. Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. You look at every team below them, they've been a more productive fantasy defense. I mean, more productive defense in general. It's legitimate defense. And then it's the best matchup. The Vikings are the 22nd opposing offense. Like you look at the Giants and the Colts, who are the other not completely trash.
The fucking Raiders are the same price. Explain that to me, Joe. I don't get it.
Like there's only I just counted it and now I'm forgetting what my number was. There's only 4 teams in this slate that average more fantasy points per game on DK than the Bears. It's the Lions, who cost 3,700 against the Colts, and I'm not even sure I actually like that more, if we're being honest.
No, I don't.
It's the Vikings, who obviously you love the Vikings against the Bears. That makes sense at 3,400. And then the Broncos, who, if I have the money, sure, I'd play them against the Raiders. That's a lock. And then it's the Packers, who are playing San Francisco. Now, if Brock Purdy doesn't play, then I like the Green Bay defense maybe.
That's a very good.
And
point.
That's only 2,800.
I might find the 300 if that's.
But otherwise, it's not even close. Like I said, if the Cardinals defense shows up big and the Seattle has one of their kind of off games, that could be a good defense. But maybe the Giants scheme some stuff up and they actually get a bunch of sacks. Things could happen. But by far, this is the best defense under $3,000 in general. It's the second best fantasy defense under 3,000 on DK. And the difference between them and the Bears is 0.2 points, or them and the Packers. It doesn't exist. And then it's Sam Darnold on the road, outdoors. Again, like you said, we check the weather. If the weather's worse, I probably like it even more. But unless I set some lineup and I'm just like, oh, I have $300 left. Maybe I'll go Green Bay if Purdy doesn't play. Otherwise, just slam this Bears defense. Because like you said, worst case, we get 3 points and okay, we spent $2,500. That's fine. And there's a reasonable chance we get 12.
Exactly. And again, I really like this slate at running back and wide receiver. It's more about what combo to play, but I feel good about them. I just hope I don't screw up the QB. Because I have that feeling that whatever QB I end up going with is Baker, Murray, or whatever, it's going to shit the bed. And that's actually getting me to think more and more. Just go with Bo Nix. Ride the hot hand. The Raiders.
Dude, last week I had Russell Wilson and Bo Nix. And I had
Bo Nix in every line.
And I did more Russell Wilson. I just felt so stupid.
You should have called me because as a Falcons fan, I would have told you, hey, we cannot get pressure.
I thought he would be good. I just thought the Ravens defense would be the normal Ravens
that.
defense, and there would be some deep shots to Pickens. I threw him in a bunch of lineups, and it was like,
Pickens actually ended up okay. It wasn't great, but I mean, he caught enough passes. Real quickly before we get it, because I want to mention one more guy that I think is absolutely okay to play in cash. I forgot about. Kudos to my girl Stacey Perez from the waiver show. Nick Westbrook for the Titans, 4,100 since the trade of DeAndre Hopkins in week 8. 11.9 fantasy points, 16 fantasy points, 6.1 fantasy points, 22.7 fantasy points. He has scored a touchdown in 5 of 6 games.
That's pretty bad.
And Houston, in case you were not watching, and if you weren't, I don't blame you because the game sucked. They gave up 350 passing yards to Cooper Rush. So I think that Texans defense is overall pretty good, but you can throw on them. So I actually think that there's some cases, especially because they give up those big plays. We saw that again, right? I mean, Westbrook last week, 6 targets, 2 catches, 117 yards, and a touchdown. I do think that he is somebody that is actually worthy in cash. If you're trying to say get a lot of expensive wide receivers, running backs, etc., I wouldn't kill it. I wouldn't do it, I don't think. But I did want to mention him because I think it's reasonable because we think they're going to be down, right? Like it's a lot of situations to where, you know, basically since Hopkins is gone, everybody's thinking Ridley. It's actually been this guy that has really benefited because he's actually played, I think, like 95% of the snaps or more and ran routes on 90% of the passing plays or more. So we are going to get out of here. I don't know what I didn't even ask you, so let's just do it live. Do you want to do a little Thanksgiving slate pod early next week? Do the double pod.
Yeah, let's do it.
I'm trying to work some things out. I may even talk to
nothing
Joe
but Cowboys and Giants
to see if we can do even maybe a crossover show with Fantasy and Frames, and we just like literally get a bunch of different people to come on. We talk each game, pick DFS plays, maybe give some prop bets. I mentioned something to Chris Robin. He sounded like he would be down. We had a blast last year doing that. Might could even get Dave Eddy to show up on camera, which that's really difficult to do these days. He's like, I'm only a Discord guy, but again, we apologize for the 2 weeks absence. 2 weeks ago, that was on both of us. Last week was on me. I know you didn't feel well, but in Vegas, I was not doing it.
No, I was incapable. I
know. That's what I'm saying.
I sounded like RFK. I sound like RFK Jr. Like that's where my voice was.
Man, now I wish I would have called you just to check on you because I'd like to hear your RFK Jr. impersonation. Were you immediately talking about how nasty the food Trump eats? And then I love how Trump then goes, "Oh yeah, you're my bitch. Now you're gonna have to eat McDonald's on a jet and take a picture with it." You see that literally within 24 hours. He said that.
Did not see that.
He said basically that the stuff that Trump eats is disgusting. And within 24 hours, no, he's not. But I just
give him that. Give RFK that. He's right about that.
24 hours is like, here, you're gonna sit here, motherfucker, and you don't have to eat this, but you gotta take a picture. And if you look at that picture, he looks so miserable. It's amazing. I love it. You know what they say, the roosters are coming home, Bobby Boucher. So, but we're going to do at least, obviously, one show next week. Sounds like we're going to do 2. Be sure to check out the Sunday Social Show Sunday morning. It is a lot of fun. Check out all the amazing work on Fantasy Six Pack, which, by the way, Joe Bond, once again, killing the rankings. I think he's number 2 overall. And I got to give some kudos to your boy. 381st out of like 12,000 entries and in the playoffs for the Scott Fish Bowl. Right now they do a 3-week first playoff round. Your average points per game up until this point is accounted in, which is big for me. And I'm 14.8 points currently, good side of the bubble, which I need because Lamar's bye will be in this 3-week stretch. And there will be a week that I start either Bryce Young or Gardner Minshew in the playoffs, the Scott Fish Bowl. But we're a tight end bully lineup. Like it's, tight end premium. That's what's carried me. I've got Bowers. I've got, McBride. I'm pretty loaded. It was really a lucky situation where my receivers all hit. I had McLaurin. I got Ladd. I got J-Mo, who He either has 50 points or 5, but that's okay. I'm good with that. But so a lot of good stuff on Fantasy Six Pack. Be sure to. I think we had 8 guys make the playoffs that are in Scott Fishbowl. So again, some of us know what we're talking about. Other ones like me just kind of got lucky because I didn't even really totally understand the rules. But I heard tight end premium. I'm like, just give me all the tight ends. Give me Brock Bowers, so I'll be good. But we will see you guys soon, and happy Turkey Day.